welcome to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean. This is Richie Merritt to my right. He's my co-host. Today we have a special guest, Dan Richard. And he says if you want, you can call him Dan Richard. So your choice. Today we're going to, well, first of all, we broadcast live on Manchester Cable Television, Channel 23 in Manchester, and we do so on Monday evenings, 5:30, Thursday morning, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. We also have a YouTube channel called Inform New Hampshire. Please stop by there and like us if you will. And we also have a Facebook group called Inform New Hampshire. So that's how we send our information out. Richie and I are concerned for our country. We know that the information that you receive from the mainstream media, which is 98% of the information in the country, is basically controlled. It's indoctrination. There is a lot of information about what's going on in the country and the world that will not be reported. I think the greatest sin is the sin of omission. So Richie and I are here to share that information with you as we find it along the way. And in particular, a lot of the information, historically speaking, of what's happened to our country, who's been the controllers, the operators, and the manipulators behind the scenes. And so that's what we do. So we're happy that you've tuned in. Today, as usual, until our good friend Jerry DeLamus is released from incarceration. We want to mention that he was kidnapped by the feds, the federal government. They illegally captured him here in the state of New Hampshire. They made up some charges against him simply for standing up for his rights and offering to go out to Nevada and arbitrate with some of the patriots out there during the Bundy Ranch standoff. And they are mad at him, and they're taking it out on him. They've incarcerated him. His wife, Susan DeLamus, is a state rep here in New Hampshire. And Richie, you want to say something about the...
Yeah, I just want to welcome everybody to the fake news, first of all. But, yeah, I want to mention about Jerry. I always want to talk about Jerry because he's a hero. He stood up for his rights, and he's being persecuted for it. But he's not out of the woods until he's home. So I would ask that you pray for him and Sue. And also, if you can contribute financially, send whatever you can to freejerrydelemus.com. And I know they'd appreciate it. That's just for the correct spelling. I know I give it every week, but it's JERRYDELEMUS. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so for most of us here in the country, in our communities, I would say a large majority of we the people are law-abiding, productive citizens. We're here to raise our families and get along. We generally follow the rules. So the rules are laid out for us in our founding documents. And in particular, the Constitution, which is a common law document, is a document that formed our federal government, and it basically was formed by the states. So the states maintained their sovereignty and their power over the government, and they enumerated some 27, 28, what was it, 20?
No, it's between 18 and 21 powers.
Sorry, 18 and 21 powers enumerated in the Constitution, and that's the rule book by which we are required to live. And then the states themselves have their own constitutions. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about common law, I think, and we're going to talk about how it applies based on the state constitution here in New Hampshire, keeping in mind that a lot of the states around the country have very similar constitutions, some of it verbatim, some of it not. And but Dan is an expert of sorts, and some of the information we're going to talk about
that's
today.
taking it a little too far.
Well, I'm going to call you an
enthusiast.
expert.
Thank you.
He's an enthusiast. Good enough. So, but I'm happy to have Dan here. So we're going to have a little fun here talking about some things. But in particular, Richie, why don't you talk about what we want to discuss?
I wanted to mention, since Dean said it, the 18 to 21 enumerated powers in the federal Constitution is what gives us the 682 federal agencies that we currently have. There should be about 20, maybe 30 tops, but what's 682 among friends? Anyway, I met Dan months ago, and we've come to a good understanding, and I respect Dan's opinion and understanding of the state constitution. He knows more about it than I do, and I've asked him to come on the show to talk about that. More so that people in New Hampshire would understand what their state constitution is, and Dan does know it better than I do, and I respect that, and I've asked him to come on to talk about it. So if you want to jump in anyway and just
No.
pick up on it.
Thank
Dan.
you, gentlemen. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very passionate about understanding, where we come from and what these laws / rules / contract compact are all about. And I think that when you chase these things down to their final resolution, is that we have a broken system at both the state and the federal level. And the solution lies in restoring the rule of law. Nothing radical. The contract between we the people in the state of New Hampshire is broken, and the compact between the state of New Hampshire and the federal government is broken. It takes a 5-year-old to read either instrument and realize that that's not what that instrument says. And my favorite example is prohibition. What did this society decide back then? That, alcohol's a problem, so we're going to increase the authority of the federal government by using Article 5 to amend it, grant it that additional power and authority, which they did. Once they discovered that, this doesn't work so well, legislating the behavior of the people was a total colossal
Farce.
I mean, take it one step further. We talk about the narco traffic trade that we have today and the flooding of our streets. How did that happen? Well, guess what Al Capone and company and all of his friends had to do when they repealed prohibition? You create an illegal network of smugglers and bootleggers who now no longer had a product. Well, they found a product. We now live with that curse. So
You really think that's what happened?
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, all those people were in place. They needed work. And not only that, the new products were even more profitable.
Well, you have to keep the crooks employed too.
Absolutely. So, but taking it one step further is that these contracts are very, very simple to read. You do not need a law degree to read either the state or the federal Constitution.
You know who else said that? Thomas Jefferson, one of the guys that wrote it.
There you go. And one of the things that is so impressive about studying the state constitution is that it predates the federal constitution. It was ratified in 1784. And one of the little known things that people don't talk about is how each of the 13 original colonies had, after the Declaration of Independence, had all declared themselves to be sovereign and free states, because it is only a sovereign and free states who can get together and form a union that we now call the United States of America. But we must understand the origin of these instruments and where they come from. And the chain of command is a simple one. God, man, the free and sovereign person, or people, we the people, and person, bad word, sorry about that. And then, of course, we move into creating a state government. That state government then contracted with the other members of the union to deal with, like Chris Ann always says, war, peace, negotiation, and commerce.
Yeah.
That's the limit of the federal system. They are a subcontractor, and it's been perverted to be completely out of control. I challenge anyone to read Article 1, Section 8 of the Federal Constitution and show me a single word where there's any authority granted to regulate anything to do about the people. It doesn't. Read it. It's a contract between the states. Patrick Henry said so well in the Virginia ratification debates. In his open commentary, he said, "We the people, who authorized anyone to speak in this language, we the people? You must be talking about a great national central democracy." Because when he read the instrument, he and George Mason were completely aware of something, that they saw the consolidating tendencies of the Federalist. They understood that they had come out of this debate in Philadelphia where there was over and over and over, they tried to make this a national central democracy. They, in the end, succeeded. That's what we have today. Mm-hmm. We're no longer a federal republic. We're now a national central democracy run by this corporation that no one authorized. So
it's hard to explain what we are, because we're fascist. We're fascist, I guess, is the best way to do it.
So
it's a combination of the government and the corporate system.
So, taking that one step forward, I'd like to jump right into the state constitution because it's a work of genius. It's funny when you read the instrument, you'll think that the federal framers plagiarized the state constitution because a lot of it comes from the English form of law, the common law, the Magna Carta,
Right.
and so many of these concepts laid out in this instrument. So let me start with the very first one, Article 1. Pardon me while I get my glasses. Eyes are getting old. Article 1, equality of men, origin, and object of government. All men are born equally free and independent. Therefore, all government of right originates from the people, is founded in consent, and is instituted for the general good. How much consent do we have going on today?
Very little.
Yeah, but the government tells us what consent we participate in and not, and they don't have that authority.
When was this instrument repealed?
Or was
I
it?
don't think it was.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was never repealed.
Yeah.
It was drafted again ratified in June 2nd of 1784. What you discover when you read the state constitution is what they call the Bill of Rights. The 39 articles are the entire legal system drafted for we the sovereign. And the Article 1 through Article 7 lays out the sovereignty. I'm going to skip over a few of them really to get to some of the meat of some of our issues. But Article 1 was important to read. Article 2 deals with natural rights, which are pretty self-explanatory, what the unalienable rights are, or to expound on them briefly. And then, of course, Article 2, bearing of arms. I'd like to bring that up, too. That's a big misnomer. People completely miss the sign on law enforcement's door, okay, to protect and to serve. It's been perverted to mean something it does not mean. Mm-hmm. The protect part isn't to protect your security. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Supreme Court, every time this issue has gone to that level, has shot it down and stated quite simply, police at the city, county, state, and federal level are not your personal security detail. You know what they're there to protect?
Your
Corporation.
rights.
That's right. What's the preamble of the Declaration of Independence? What's in the preamble? Governments are instituted among men to do what?
Secure the rights of the people.
That's right. That's right. So that's what they're there to do. They're there to know this instrument. You ask almost anyone in the state legislature or anyone that's an elected official or serving us in the government if they've read this document.
No.
Well, how are they there? How are they going to do their job?
Well, they're not, but we keep electing these people. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but look at the names that we elect.
Yep.
Time after time after time. The family names that have been in 40 years, 50 years. Kennedy's is a good one.
Right.
Because they're all gone. So at least I can mention them. Rockefellers. There's a lot more. I won't mention.
Absolutely. So moving along, we get into society, its organizations and purposes, the rights of conscience unalienable, religious freedom recognized. Now, this is something that's perverted as well constantly when we see the separation of church and state. And I think as a society, we continue to live with one of the tenets of common law that's been a curse to us, which is case law. Mm-hmm. When they got it wrong, and they compel us to live by wrong rulings. McCulloch versus Maryland, for example, with Justice Marshall, right? He was completely wrong. When you study what he told the Virginia delegation in 1788 was completely contrary to how he rules in McCulloch versus Maryland, where completely ignoring state rights. And this is an argument that goes on back and forth throughout our entire history, understanding the power of the state, the sovereign state, and its subcontractor, the federal government. Moving on to the religious aspect is this. The religious aspect under common law was critical because you had the 10 commandments that were written on the hearts of the people because it was the moral compass. And regardless of whether you're someone who believes in Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, is that all of them do address some form of moral code. Mm-hmm. And so in the common law, it was critical because, as you probably have talked about before, you have two primary tenets: do no harm and cause no loss. And so those were all revolving around what? The fact that the framers of the New Hampshire Constitution were all predominantly practicing Christians. So this gave them a moral compass and a moral code to regulate themselves. But anyway, so it covers that for that specific purpose, and then it gets into morality and piety. And then the biggest one of all in this first page is state sovereignty. And let me read it to you. The people of the state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as free, sovereign, and an independent state, and do, and forever hereafter shall, exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right pertaining thereto, which is not, or may not hereafter be, by them expressly delegated to the United States of America in Congress assembled. And of course, the Continental Congress was already in existence. So they were already in, dealing with how are we going to take the 13 territories, the original colonies, and make them be something. Because after the Declaration of Independence, obviously they were aware the king wasn't going to take it laying down. And so, but the state sovereignty, again, same thing. This is something that's never been repealed, okay? That the individual purpose of creating government is that we told the king, you are no longer the sovereign, we are the sovereign. And we inverted the paradigm. It became a different concept altogether.
Yeah, but when we elect our officials, don't we give away our sovereignty to them who are part-time? No, don't we?
Show me where.
Because that's what I was told.
Yeah, I know. Hey, we were all told the same thing. And they when you speak to some of these representatives and legislators, they do mental gymnastics to come to their position completely ignoring this instrument. And but the state sovereignty, again, is critical because without the sovereign declaration, it can't then delegate that the state be sovereign. Without the state being granted that position of sovereignty, it can't delegate any sovereign aspects to the federal government.
Right.
So it's all predicated on the proper chain of command. And so
it's easy. Can I just jump in?
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
easy
yeah.
enough to figure out. This is how I look at it. If the people aren't sovereign, then let's remove them from the planet. And maybe before we do that, we can nominate deers to run the country, because they'd be pretty good at it. I mean, do I need to say any more? Really?
So yeah, that's and that really gets to the heart of a lot of additional conversation, as you and I have been talking about with the 14th Amendment and the federal Constitution, and how unconstitutional the instrument is from the word go. The 14th Amendment, it's number one, it was written at the end of the barrel of a gun. It was during Reconstruction. So the South didn't go along with it. They were compelled to do so in order to regain their status. And so, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. But when you read that instrument, it's a surrender of sovereignty. It's a surrender of state sovereignty, individual sovereignty, and that the federal government is now in control of our lives. There's only one problem. There's no authority for that position. There was never a constitutional convention. The states never authorized or relinquished their sovereignty. How can you write that instrument when I still, under the state, have sovereignty here?
Well, didn't they do it by way of setting up a corporation of some sort that ran it?
Some
they
of that
authorized to do that either, though.
I know.
Well, the creation of the corporate entity gets into a lot of too much conspiracy theory, I think, surrounds that instrument. The state and many of the government agencies must incorporate in order to do business. An entity cannot function unless it has a what's the legal term? Someone who is an agent and an agent's address, or the entity can't function, right? Because the state is a contract. It's a piece of paper. It can't swim. It can't ride a bike. It can't plow the roads. It can't do any of these things without an agent. So only by attaching an agent and a legal address are they capable of doing the people's business and doing commerce. Now, you're going down a different direction, I think, that pertains to the birth certificate issue. which is something that goes on further on down the line. But for the focus of this show, I was going to build a good foundation for where we go from here.
Please do. Yep.
So the state sovereignty was a critical subject, and this is one of the ones that I love that follows it, and it deals with what you just said about sovereignty. Article 8, accountability of magistrates and officers, public's right to know. That was an add-on, by the way, public's right to know. All power residing originally in and being derived from the people. All of the magistrates and officers of government are their substitutes and agents, and at all times accountable to them. Huh. Really? Mm-hmm. Tell that to the local next time you get pulled over or in front of a judge.
I think
he works for you.
You're interpreting that wrong, though. It doesn't say what it says.
Okay.
It says something different. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be different.
All I know is that I just declared what's amazing, and Richie and I have had this conversation, is it's amazing when we listen to people who take a different position, which is
using their mental gymnastics, as you said.
Yeah, using mental gymnastics, because hold on, if the sovereign free people who just told the king to jump in the lake and that they are now a free and independent state, free and independent country. Mm-hmm. Because that's what New Hampshire is. We keep using the word state as if we're a county. We're not. Mm-hmm. The sovereignty is still there legally, lawfully, but not used. And that's the greatest failure of our states, by the way.
Yeah, we're a nation state.
Well, our greatest failure as a republic has been the inability for the states to actually do their job and to nullify the overreach. And that failure has happened over and over several hundred years. So this isn't just a simple one-off event. It's happened over and over again. But I was talking to Richie about this, and it's like, hold on. I just declared myself and my state sovereign just long enough for this ink to dry so that I can give it away to the state legislature in order for them to write rules, laws, and regulations governing the conduct of the people.
Micromanage my life, yeah.
With no authority. Mm-hmm. There is no authority. It's just like if you are one of my favorites is Article 3 in the federal Constitution about the Supreme Court. Please reread that instrument and show me a single letter or word granting the Supreme Court the final arbiter of what is constitutional and what is not. Mm-hmm. It's not, and this is one of the reasons I found Richie, is I was starting to research the common law and the common law grand jury. And once I discovered that this had been done away with because it's still required under the state constitution under Article 4 to create courts of record for that jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, something I do on a regular basis.
They got rid of it so that they could use the Supreme Court to
be the final arbiter.
Yeah.
Be the final arbiter, and that's really...
Which they could control.
You mentioned something earlier, too, Dan, and I wanted to jump in on it. With the case law,
yep.
It isn't case law at all. We all call it that, but it isn't case law. A Supreme Court decision is an opinion written by the justices.
Right.
It has no effect on anybody other than the individuals mentioned in that case.
Right. I agree.
Oh, no. That's the way it is.
Yep.
If I take them to court... I take you to court, rather. I'm sorry, and the Supreme Court rules in my favor against you. Someone else can't say, "Well, yeah, Richie won his case against Dan, so I'm going to do the same thing." Well, the circumstances might be different.
True.
How the hell can they rule on that?
Right.
You can't.
Right.
And it's an opinion too. It's not
on the way over here, we had another conversation in regards to emphasizing the individuality of the state, and. I think when studying the subject of history, it always comes down to the same thing: jurisdiction.
Yep.
Jurisdiction. So here on the land, the territory formerly called New Hampshire became a sovereign country in 1784. Mm-hmm. The people created their own common law system of adjudicating all criminal and civil matters, including capturing capital crimes, dealing with civil disputes. The only thing that they were not quite prepared for was to deal with the Admiralty jurisdiction and courts of equity, because those were the two remaining issues that were yet to be defined. Because again, the federal Constitution hadn't been written yet, so the delegation of that authority hadn't happened yet either. So that little bit of wiggle room was gone. Once we signed the federal Constitution, that was gone. It became Article 1, Section 8 became the law of the land. But that's a tricky word too, because when you use that concept, you have to remember that the entire federal U.S. Constitution is an issue of international matters between the states, between foreign countries, between Indian tribes. It's actually all Admiralty jurisdiction. The state, on the other hand, is all under, that is the law of the land, other than what the subcontractor will do for us. And it's critical to understand that concept, that it all begins with the state. The state then gives authority via the federal Constitution to perform Article 1, Section 8. It's limited to that scope.
Yep.
So you have to understand where you stand within your rights under the state constitution. There's a lot more to get into here with this instrument.
Yep. Well, it's very well said.
Yeah.
You laid it out very well. We're down to 2 minutes. Is there something else you want to go over real quick in that, Sean?
The biggest thing is understanding the jurisdiction. I think that people get lost. It's easy to get lost in the propaganda, the what's the word? A lot of false media stories, and people who are trying to learn about our history and liberty get lost in too many of the fantasy stories. Stick to what is tangible, what is factual. Believe me, go read the Bill of Rights 1 through 39 and tell me that's not a comprehensive list. That is our jurisdiction. That is the supreme law of the state of New Hampshire for land jurisdiction dealing with we the sovereign people. Under Article 3, we agree to, if we are called before our peers because Johnny down the road said, hey, you stole my bicycle, or you ran over my cow, right? There's a remedy for all of that. Okay. And so that's the biggest part, is that common law process is still the law of the land. Our state legislature refuses to provide us courts of record for redress.
Right.
And they're it's federal crime to do so. So they could be subject to some consequences for that.
Well, they took it away from us in 1946, right? All right. Anything else, Richie, you want to say before we head out?
Just thanks to Danny for coming. He did a good job. I think he did a good job. And please share this with people. We're trying to educate people so that we can break free from our ignorance and our corruption in our country.
Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week.
Yes, it's building magic.